Normally, when I make character designs, I take a moment to not really focus on the visuals, but more on how they would interact or do candid things related to their job and such. You would probably ask yourself, why would I do that if I don't have their look down yet? Isn't it a waste of time to sketch like this if they're going to be discarded anyway once the actual final design gets approved? And they look nothing like it. I see these sketches more as a way to spark new ideas that don't come from looks, but come more from gestures and personality quirks. I think you could call it acting sketching, perhaps. Uh, we're not trying to get to a person's look, but more to a person's energy, if that's how you could call it. I ask myself whether it would be interesting to have her ride the teapot, like a magical driven vehicle or something. Really like giving this the motor girl energy. In the game itself, it could be that the gathering session are split into walking and riding and flying sections to diversify terrain journeying a little. Uh, One moment she could be blazing through the air and forest, and the next moment be sneaking through tunnels or whatever the game requires you to do in that scenario. Then the teapot becomes this functional artifact that can make tea, but also search for clues and give you a ride as well. So yeah, just sketching it out will make our brain go like, ooh, maybe that's a fun idea to do, or maybe I can do this. And I can really recommend it if you're stuck on visuals and just want to open up a little and get fresh ideas. Another idea that popped in my head while I was drawing the vehicle sketch is since the brewer is probably alone a lot and only has her teapot, she probably doesn't interact much with the other people or other people in general in this world. This could be a bit boring, so I imagined that she could actually communicate with the gods, but she has no control over when the gods decide to contact her in their strange godlike ways. So in this case, she could be hunched over a table trying to pry out some organs from a fish, and then the sea gods decide to channel their speech through the fish and overly officially request her to make a new blend with these new requirements and such. Then traversing the world would open you up to much more potential interactions and requests from the gods because they are probably terrain or rank locked and such. So the more you play, the more higher end requests will come through strange ways. And with the brewer, however, strange the ways the gods use to contact her is like never shocked or always unfazed. It's just like another day of work to her. You could go like really funny and crazy with these interactions, requests, moments from the gods, and I would honestly want to see that happen myself. I'm not sure if it's common part in the pipeline to do sketches or sketch work like this, especially a small comic like this, but I wanted to do it anyway since it always helped me a lot with visualizing the character's personality, but also potentially game design features and that are centered around the character's personality and job. So you might not get visual ideas out of these sketches, and there's definitely a huge chance that the characters won't look like this in the end, but it's also not necessarily the goal of these. So, in my opinion, it's not wasted efforts if they bring you some more fun ideas. So, this is the second day of the process, and I have received feedback from the clients. They had some really fair and helpful criticisms. As I somewhat expected, they mentioned the values I used to not help with the reading of the character. I wanted to give some volume to the shapes, but they would rather have me focus more on making the values differentiating between the different parts of the design instead. The character needs to be clear and the different elements need to be readable from a distance once you go and get to play them. And having clear, dark, and light and or busy and calm areas is a better way to go about it than how I went about it the first pass. So now that I got that confirmation, I'll be way more careful with how I'm using that moving forward. They, however, did like the designs, and they mentioned that they liked the way the pot sits on her hip. In the second pass, for example, it almost looked like a nest of some kind where the teapot could be resting in when it's not activated or awake or something. With that in mind, I found it was somewhat time to introduce the teapot gradually here and make them a companion instead of an object. They like the animal features, so I could continue exploring with that. Even though we've got a neat reference board to help us out creating the design, I still just scroll through images of all kinds on Pinterest or Google during the process to see if I find anything new I could add, and I did. So for this concept, the only extra key inspiration for the design was this lovely head I found. The round and elegant shape just appealed so much to me, and even though it barely had anything to do with the theme, I still felt compelled to add it to the design in some way. Since I was a little stumped at the beginning, I decided to just use it as a starting point and see where it grows from there on out. Of course, while moving forward, having to keep in mind the feedback I received in the previous iterations. Once I had the hat and the expression in place, the rest of her design came quite naturally. She quickly turned into this quirky brewer decked out in a somewhat fancy but self-made looking attire. Sometimes all it takes is a random object or image to spark that needed inspiration. Her back was also screaming for a tail, so I added this short, big, and poofy one, and I'm really glad I did. It sort of reminded me of a hamster, and it added a lot of cuteness to her design. The connection between her small hoofed feet and her upper body also felt way less jarring because of it. I could already imagine her running and seeing the tail sway all adorably behind her while you play her. If a design just casually makes you smile while drawing, I know I'm doing somewhat of a good job, even though I'm also still struggling. One of these struggles for me was having to use only values instead of colors during this process. It's the only thing that's completely different in my own personal way of creating characters. I always start thinking in colors immediately when trying to think of a design for a character. Sometimes even just only a color palette I find sparks enough inspiration to create a whole character design around. I feel like this is because I'm used to illustrating more than I'm used to concepting. I prioritized aesthetics and moods a lot over functionality and readability, that I found it hard to just think in values only. But I understand that this is a normal part of the pipeline that the clients expect from me, so I will adapt to it. I started using these three base values, dark, medium, and light, and soon had an easier time adjusting. You can create some strong contrast between elements without having to think too deep about what the materials or colors are yet. Nonetheless, it's still helpful to keep potential colors in the back of your mind while doing values. Once you go into colors, the values will have to loosely translate to the corresponding colors, or else you'll lose the nicely crafted contrast hierarchy you've established in the values. The values also help me think about where I eventually could potentially create some nice pattern structure. I don't really need to go in depth about that right now, but just dotting down some scribbles to make it look busy will tell the client what it could look like if you use this space to make an intricate design or something. The teapot received a lot more love in this iteration. They made me kind of think of a Pokemon, to be truly honest. Like, I imagined a sentient being that can't really talk but still has their own personality and quirks in the as the perfect counterpart for the brewer to interact with. Uh, but once again, I don't go too in depth as much. I want to hit a good direction for the brewer first before I fully focus on the teapot. Some might say that this is a little counterproductive since they are a pair and should be designed together. I think both ways have their merits, and I would say do what feels most natural in a moment based on the time that you have and the needs of the project.